Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Matt Rhule gets it done, landing top 40 national prospect, the number 2 tight end in the country, Carter Nelson from the state of Nebraska. Dill, we're talking about Matt Rhule taking over and kind of taking his marquee recruiting victory. Like, this one's it. You go up against Georgia, Notre Dame for the country. Massive win for Matt Rhule. Going to talk a little bit about what Carter Nelson brings to the table, and then just talk about where this program is going with Matt Rhule, specifically on the recruiting trail. Now, before we get into it, again, just want to say thank you to you guys, and especially the Nebraska fans. Any chance we get to talk to Nebraska football, we're certainly taking it up. You guys have just shown a ton of support. So if you do enjoy the updates, you enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Again, we're Michigan fans, but we've been down to Lincoln. We've watched some games at Nebraska, and it's phenomenal experience. Some of the best fans in the world. So appreciate you guys rocking with the boys. Dale, I'm going to kick it off to you. Carter Nelson, staying home, going to Lincoln, Nebraska.
And you mentioned it. This is just the premier type of win that Matt Rhule needs to start stacking together. And he's at a place now that gives him a chance to do it. In his last couple stops, he didn't necessarily have a shot at a guy like Carter Nelson. I mean, to be this big, this athletic, and be this much of a difference maker, that was always a hard sell to bring a guy like that to a school like Baylor. Not to put anything down on Baylor, but they're no Nebraska. They don't have the support. They don't have the name. It's just a different level of program. So this is the type of guy, again, Matt Rhule is going to take this program up to the Tom Osborne kind of level. These are the battles he's going to need to win, and it's good to see he's getting it done before they even really start winning games.
Yeah, I'm straight up drinking the Kool-Aid. I tell myself every year not to drink the Kool-Aid for Nebraska. I am destroying some Kool-Aid because you talk about Matt Rhule in terms of how he runs a program. Like, one of the best in the country, right? Wins at Temple. Then he goes to Baylor, wins at Baylor. Those are hard jobs to win at. Nebraska, it's a sleeping giant. You are given the keys to a massive program. If Matt Rhule can continue to recruit at this level, have these type of victories, there's no ceiling for what Nebraska can be as a program. And Dale, you mentioned it best. Imagine if you start stacking some wins. I mean, this is a program that has been devoid of wins for so long. It's going to catch the attention of a lot of young kids in high school. And once you get them up to Lincoln, like a kid from Florida, a kid from California who might not understand the special culture that Nebraska football is, I think this thing can go from, like, you're sitting at a top 15 class right now with Carter Nelson in the ship. You're talking about top 10, top 8 classes and really competing at a national level again.
And I can't see why Nebraska couldn't do it again. Matt Rhule, he is as good as it gets in terms of developing guys. And if you want to go play pro football, he's been kind of one of those coaches that he'll bring you up that. Maybe the high school recruiting rankers won't say you're that guy, but Matt Rhule, he gets everything out of people. And imagine if he gets everything out of
Carter Nelson
for guys like he can do at Nebraska. Because again, he's never really been at a spot that can recruit this way.
That's probably the best point. That's probably the best way to summarize. I was trying to think about how to say that. That's the best way to say it. Matt Rhule is a guy. He's a coach. Shouldn't tell him a guy. He's a coach that gets everything out of a player. Imagine if you get everything out of Carter Nelson, Eric Gilbert, Thomas Fedone, those type of tight ends, and you could extrapolate that to the whole roster. I mean, he's going to be able to recruit at a high level at Nebraska, and if he continues to run that program and get out like 100% of the potential of these players, it's going to be a really good next couple of years for Nebraska. There's no doubt in my mind Matt Rhule is the man for the job. And to circle back to just Carter Nelson, I think these tight ends are massive for this offense because Satterfield's going to run a lot of 12 personnel. And when you can have difference makers at that tight end position and use them as weapons, like he kind of used Jaheim Bell at South Carolina, that's when it gets special. And Carter Nelson is probably the best difference maker in the country when it comes to tight ends coming in this 2024 class.
In this year will be an interesting kind of precursor to see what they want to do. I mean, you look at what they're doing. They are kind of building it from the inside out in terms of pass catchers. Like, they probably have 3 tight ends or so that are going to be very prominent in this offense. In the wide receiver group's going to be good, but it's probably not as deep and as developed or as much potential maybe as this tight end class has. And again, if that's going to be what they do, this is like the type of guy you need. A different
Georgia's been doing it. Georgia's been going through the tight ends in their passing game, and it seems to be working out pretty well. I mean, Michigan does the same thing. Like we talk about wide receiver production. Where's the wide receiver production? Like if you got elite tight ends, Brock Bowers comes to mind, or Colson Loveland at Michigan, like they can be difference makers in the offense. And I feel like sometimes the national media focuses on the flashy receivers,
and especially guys who can run. Like if you have a tight end who can run, then you can. I mean, you get beyond like you go to like the Kyle Pitts kind of world or what Brock Bowers really gives you. It's like a guy you can split him out, you can put him in line, you can just have him anywhere, and he's just impossible to deal with. And if that's what Nebraska, and that looks like kind of what they want to do, given what they've brought in what it looks like, what their spring game even frankly looked like at times. Again, this is the type of guy who will function really well, and if he can prove. If Zach Carter Nelson, I should say, proves that he can function well, maybe you can open up the floodgates.
I'll say this. You're talking about Carter Nelson being able to run. Give me 210 pounds running an 11-second 100-meter dash time. Like this dude is an absolute freak when it comes to physical traits, and I'm sure Nebraska fans already know that. Now I want to talk about like what this class looks like, the first one under Matt Rhule, because it's coming together. Maybe a little bit of a slow start, but this is not even with Carter Nelson into the fold yet. You're sitting at a 16th overall with 21 commits. I mean, once they add Carter Nelson, you're talking about 14th, 13th best class in the country. And what they're doing is, I think, really exciting. Like you're Matt Rhule, you have a couple guys that like are massive wins. Mario Buford, Roger Gradney, Devon Hall, like those guys you went up against Texas A&M in some cases, and got those guys out of the state of Texas. Obviously, Devon Hall coming from Bellevue West. Matt Rhule's starting to get some big wins on the trail, but then you also check out kind of towards the diamonds in the rough, if you will. Matt Rhule's been one of the best coaches in the country at kind of identifying these kind of guys, right? Quinn Clark, coming from Bozeman, Montana, the number one player in Montana, 6'5", 190, and he can run. That sounds like a Matt Rhule guy. And then you can check out Rex Gutierrez, who ran a 4.43 40 at Nebraska's camp, and I believe they offered him on the spot there. Like these guys are guys that maybe 24/7 Sports, not getting their scouts out to Bozeman, Montana to check out Quinn Clark, or not getting them out to Colorado. Man, Matt Rhule's finding them. Matt Rhule turns over every rock across the country to find talent, and he's certainly doing that.
And that's, I think, even again, when we talk, like, yeah, I do think Nebraska's in when Matt Rhule, especially when he gets the program rocking, if he does, like, I do think that those big 4 or 5 stars will be part of what they do.
Oh, 100%.
But I don't think this will ever, like, leave his DNA.
No.
Hunting out these guys who are way under recruited, coming with a chip on their shoulder, and are going to be guys who come in and work and play and do the things Matt Rhule wants from his players. That always is going to be part of what he does. It has to be part of what he does, because that's, again, I think that's what made him so successful at Temple and so successful at Baylor, is he was able to bring in, again, those just under-recruited guys who just are
overlooked. And you go look at some of those Baylor classes. Like Jalen, we talked about it when we talked Kawan Lacey on Monday. Like Jalen Petrie, which I'm sure many Nebraska fans know of. He was an All-American safety at Baylor. Now he's a second-round pick. He's crushing in the NFL. He was outside the top 700 nationally. Tyquan Thornton was another guy that was underrated and became an All-Big 12 receiver, went second round of the New England Patriots. Like Matt Rhule, not only, I mean, there's two elements to it, right? It's player development, but it's also talent eval. And like 24/7 Sports say, I don't see much in Jalen Petrie. Mid 3-star, low 3-star, probably going to play at a group of 5 school. Matt Rhule says no. It finds him, gets him on campus, gets him in the program. You start winning some ball games with those kind of guys. And what's exciting, Dale, is like what this class could be like, right? You add Carter Nelson in the fold. Grant Bricks, I think he has a good possibility to end up in this Nebraska class too. Top 100 national ranked dude, the number 5 tackle in the country from Iowa. That's got Nebraska written all over him.
And that's it. Like, you also wonder if, like, okay, you bring in a Carter Nelson, does that open it up a little bit and make other guys believe it, make a fellow, an offensive lineman or someone like, oh, maybe if I come to this program, we have something, we can win. And if Nebraska can win, those guys can probably make a lot of money in college with the new rules, and if they get the program behind them. But also, that's how you get drafted at the end of the day. The draft picks come from the winning programs. And if they can just all kind of believe in it and again, bring in a guy like Bricks and then a Nelson, and if you can do that, I do think that's kind of what builds that momentum and gets the other guys to take a leap too. And again, you've seen Nebraska has been down for sure. They were down with Scott Frost, but again, if Matt Rhule can convince the guys and sell them on his vision,
there's an element of, and I this is probably I don't mean to piss off Nebraska fans right now, but there's an element of that happening with Colorado. Right when Travis Hunter decides to follow Coach Prime to Colorado, when Kermani McLean flips his commitment to Colorado, what did that do? He started turning some heads from these 4-star, 5-star athletes. Like, oh, I'll go check out Colorado. Now, we haven't really seen that get off the ground, but you could see kind of a similar thing happening in Nebraska where it's, oh, Carter Nelson just turned down Georgia, Notre Dame to play tight end. He's going to Nebraska, staying home. Yeah, all right, sounds good to me. Like that he is like kind of a momentum builder on the recruiting trail. And then shout out Daniel Kaelin, just getting it done. Like there's not a quarterback recruiting harder. I know you missed out on Dylan Rhule, and I'm not going to say that's necessarily a good thing, but there's not been a guy recruiting harder for Nebraska in this 2024 class than Daniel Kaelin. Now, before we close out, I do want to highlight one more target for Nebraska. Ernest Campbell from Texas, 10 300-meter dash time. You know, Matt Rhule is pretty much exclusively bringing in a track athlete. We want speed. Ernest Campbell, 5'9", 160 pounds, or 5'8", 160 pounds. He's not the biggest guy, but this dude absolutely burns. He could be the next Nebraska commit too, so keep your eye on that. But Nebraska, hot on the trail. Carter Nelson committing. It's going to be some fun times in Lincoln. Appreciate the Cornhusker fans checking us out. If you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later.